In 2020, we made a commitment as an organisation to respond constructively to the Black Lives Matter movement, aiming to become more diverse, more inclusive, and support more Black-owned businesses. 100 Stories is a new video and podcast series that's intended to provide a platform for people of colour to share their experiences of prejudice and journeys to success.
So, welcome to 100 Stories. My name's Joseph Bradfield, and today I'm joined by Stephanie Pryor, who is the Marketing and Business Development Manager for Healy's LLP. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for coming on 100 Stories. I thought we'd start by just talking a little bit about your background and your experiences growing up. How you got to where you are today, really.
Sure. So originally I grew up in Littlehampton. I left there when I was 13 years old, came to Brighton when I was 14, went to Hove Park School. At school, actually prior to moving to Brighton, I enjoyed education. I was doing really well in school, but I think moving at the age of 14 and the transition, some of the classes were different when I went to Hove Park. For example, I was studying French in Littlehampton, but when I came to Hove, they were studying German, so it put me a year behind in terms of my languages. And I suppose a lot of the teachers had already, in many ways, decided who their favourite students were and had built a relationship with those students. So I kind of struggled with education. I came out of school with only 2 GCSEs above C grade. At the time, like many teenagers, I was very confused, didn't know. I knew that I should be doing better for myself, but I wasn't sure how to go about it. So the following year, I re-got my GCSEs, redid my A-levels, but somehow managed to fail those again. And that time I remember being really upset because unlike my GCSEs, I'd put in 125% to pass. And on one particular one, I just didn't understand how I failed. So the drama exam, for example, was a 3-hour exam where you could take notes into it. And I shared my pre-prepared notes with my drama teacher, and she gave me a high grade for it. And all of my coursework was A and B, C grade. So I was really confident that I would get at least a C in drama. And I enjoyed that class as well. And when I opened up my A-level results, I had a U. And I had a U in the exam, but I had a D overall. And I remember I just burst into tears and I went up to the drama teacher and I said, how can this happen? Like, we have to contest this. Like, this is not correct. I know that I put in the work. And she said to me, I don't think there's any point you contesting it. And she got the head of year over and she basically escorted me off of the Hove Park grounds and said, I think it's time for you to consider a different alternative to education. And I remember leaving the school and I was just so dissatisfied with that. So I decided to do an access course at the Brighton Met College for policy, politics and globalisation at the time. And that gave me 3 A's to then go to university. So that's how I managed to eventually get to university. Even that was difficult because I remember in our access class, we were told that if we got all A's, we would almost be guaranteed a space at Sussex University, with it being a local university and them having the connections there. And at the time, out of 20 students, I was the only person who put in an application for Sussex University and didn't get through. However, I did get a place at Goldsmiths University in London, which ended up being a better university for the course that I was studying. So it all worked out really well. And then from university, I got some work experience at the BBC in investigative journalism. At the time, I was studying anthropology and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to take a more legal route or a media route, but I knew that my interest was representation, really. So yeah, did some work with the BBC, voluntary for a year, got to interview stage. They swapped the producers at the time. So the gentleman that was interviewing me didn't know me. And I didn't get the job based on the fact that I had no proper media experience, which was really crushing after constantly going back up to London, back and forth as a student on, living off part-time hours and my student funds. To put in that sacrifice and not get something out of it was difficult. Then I went on to work in legal services. I went for an admin job initially, but my boss saw that I was quite a creative individual and knew that I probably wouldn't have stayed in the job. So he actually created a role for me. And that's how I ended up working in sales and marketing.
Okay, wow, it's a long and winding route that you've taken there. I'm interested now, actually, how you felt the experience of the world of media and the legal world differ in that respect. Do you feel like there are sort of different forms of bias and things going on in those worlds?
It's a difficult one to answer. I mean, when I look back at my experience in the media at the BBC, I remember at the time, so I was studying in London at Goldsmiths University, and it was a very multicultural university and area. And because the BBC was situated in London, I expected it to be a diverse environment. And at the time, I remember I stayed at my cousin's house in order to go and do the voluntary work with the BBC, as it was 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And I remember getting on the tube and just acknowledging how diverse the environment was in comparison to what I was used to in Brighton. And I loved it. I really enjoyed that. And then when I got to the BBC, I noticed that there were very few Black people working at the BBC. I was the only Black girl that was doing work experience. And even to get to that position, I actually put in 6 applications to even get to that position. So yeah, it wasn't easy to even get through the door. So yeah, and I remember when I was working at the BBC, women in particular, women of colour, were very welcoming to me and wanted to make sure that I was okay and that I was getting the most out of the experience. It was obvious that there was 4 of us that were doing voluntary work at the time. And I did notice that a couple of them got more opportunities than I did. And I remember really trying hard to get the attention of the directors and the producers. Something that I actually did was I wrote a proposal and I presented it to the producer of Rogue Traders. And she said to me, no one's ever done that before that's on work experience. Like, that's really impressive. And that actually got me to interview stage. But regardless of how hard I tried and the networking that I did, I just couldn't seem to get through that barrier. Whereas I remember seeing a girl a year after doing my initial work experience who got placed on the same day as me, working at the BBC a year later. And I remember thinking, what was it that she did? And I couldn't remember anything significant that she did that I didn't. And I'm very competitive and I always, try and make the most out of each situation. So that was difficult. And I do remember thinking, is it me? Is it that I don't fit in? And I suppose, throughout my whole career in life, there's been many a times where I'm searching for that environment where I'm working with a team of people that really acknowledge my skills and that we can work together, because I know that really that's what makes a successful team and business, really. Whenever you listen to leaders like Oprah Winfrey and other successful people, it's having that successful team and diverse team, and you really appreciate everybody's input that really helps drive that success. So yeah, I remember sort of thinking, I obviously don't fit in here. I've done everything and I'm still not good enough. With regards to the legal industry, I am aware through statistics that obviously in higher positions there's less diversity when we look at board members, but nevertheless in the legal industry in itself there's definitely a rise of the AME people coming into the industry, women as well progressing in the legal industry. And I believe there's about 50% of women working in the legal industry, but when we look at the positions of those women is where we can obviously see that there's a differentiation and that there possibly are barriers. But I've been quite fortunate. So when I initially started working in legal services, I went for a job in administration. And like I say, the employer noticed straight away that there were certain skills that he thought that he could take advantage of and use within his business in a way that he hadn't considered previously. So he created that role for me. And I think as a boss, you know, he was very forward thinking and he wanted the best. So I haven't necessarily well, in that particular situation, I didn't come across any issues of unconscious bias. I think that was a really good working environment. In many ways, that's how many working environments should be. If you're good at something as an individual, regardless of what you look like or what your background is, that person sees that and they put you to use and they take advantage of your skills and empower you. Now I work in a law firm. I work for an international law firm. So in certain aspects, we are quite a diverse team. But nevertheless, in terms of like unconscious bias, I remember when I went for the interview, at the time I was working in another role and I had cornrows in my hair. And I remember saying to a colleague, I've got an interview next week for an international law firm based in Brighton. I don't know if I should keep my hair like this. I don't want it to let me down or, you know, for me to lose the opportunity because of how I look. Although I have no issues with cornrows, I love wearing my hair in braids and it's part of my identity. I am also aware that there are stereotypes that are that come with certain hairstyles. I mean, women in general, I think we're aware that appearance, you know, we are judged on appearance. Appearance does mean something. I think there's even evidence to suggest that women who wear makeup are more likely to earn more than those that don't. And I feel that that might even be more so apparent when it comes to women of colour. So I do think about that, and I have thought about that when I'm going for interviews. But my colleague actually turned around and said to me, no, go as yourself. There's nothing, you know, there's nothing wrong with your hair, go as you. And that's exactly what I did. I went with my cornrows, a mustard yellow dress and leopard skin heels. And I had a fantastic interview and I ended up getting the job. So yes, I am aware of unconscious bias. But I would also say that sometimes it's in our heads as well. And it's important for us not to necessarily allow that to lead our decisions. You know, it's really important to go to an interview or go to any situation as you are. And I feel if I reflect back on my successes, I've always done best when I just come as myself.
That's a really, really good kind of positive sign about your work environment as well, right? And they you know, they're interested in you for you rather than something that you've created for them.
Definitely. And I mean, it could also come into what I do in my job. So my work is business development and marketing. You know, I'm not the main face, for example, of many businesses. I'm driving other individuals, you know, to promote their success and their experience and knowledge. So I'm very much in the background. And I think if you want the best marketing manager or business development manager, I think you have to look much further than the person that's in front of you and how they look. I think you're thinking about what are those person's skills, you know, how adaptive are they? What's their experience of bringing in business? What are they like networking? I think these are more important things. You know, we need to be interviewing people as individuals. And I think when we do, you know, more chances than not, we might find the best candidate, which is what it's all about, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. And talking of networking, you told a story recently at an event we were both that, but I thought was very, very revealing and offered, you know, a perspective that I wouldn't necessarily have thought about as a white man. So, you know, would you mind sharing that again here?
Sure. So when I first started working in my role, I was invited to a prestigious event at the Grand Hotel, the Lord Taverners event, which happens every December, or would have done prior to COVID-19. And the Lord Taverners is a male orientated event. It has been, but nevertheless, in recent years, women in business are encouraged to attend. And I was kindly invited by a colleague. And during the event, when I was sitting down and I was networking at the bar with other individuals, a gentleman come up to me who owned a very large accountancy firm. And he sat down next to me and he said something along the lines of, what's being black and a woman in business, how's being black and a woman of business working out for you? And I was in a circle of about 8 people. And I saw a couple of people to my right just turn and look at me to see what my reaction would be, probably. And then they sort of put their heads back down because I don't think they really wanted to comment on the situation. And I said, it's working out fine, thank you very much. And then he just went in to say, you know, I am aware that, you know, black people have to work twice as hard to get to certain positions within their career. So to see you here, I would imagine that you've worked hard, and it's a reflection of the fact that you're very good at what you do. And he eventually actually went on to offer me a job and give me his business card. Now, the experience is a bit of a weird one. I know that he didn't mean anything by it. I don't think he meant to upset me anyway or call me out. But nevertheless, I probably did have a bit of sweat, it sort of turn up on my upper lip, where I was just a bit, it was quite awkward, I suppose. And it really shone the light on me as an individual. And probably made me more aware of the fact that I was the only black woman in the room. I go to loads of events and, you know, I probably am the only person, sometimes I am the only person of colour in the room, but he really made me focus on that. But nevertheless, I also know that obviously he meant it in a kind way, in the sense that he assumed that I have worked very hard and I'm obviously very good at what I do, and he could see that there would be qualities in that for his business, and he obviously wanted to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think it was something we discussed quite a bit at the event we were both at, and I think there's an assumption on the part of you know, a lot of white men, particularly, that there's a kind of responsibility of any kind of marginalized community to kind of talk through their experience at every opportunity. Yeah, and it's certainly something that's I've kind of reflected on, and I hope something that a lot of other people will reflect on as well. So I wanted to talk a little about this year, 2020, and what's been happening with the Black Lives Matter movement following the murder of George Floyd earlier this year. I'm interested to know what your feelings about that movement have been, and your kind of response to it. Do you think it's been you know, a broadly positive move, or is there lots more still to do? What's your thoughts?
I feel that it's quite an uncomfortable movement for everyone, if I'm honest. At the beginning, well, in June, when George Floyd's death was publicised all over the media and on social media, I think that was quite difficult for a lot of people to watch. Firstly, I couldn't personally watch the whole video. So yeah, and it's shone a lot of light on the inequalities globally. It's a difficult one to answer because I think, I mean, the situation in the UK is very different to what's taking place in the United States. But nevertheless, I have seen a rise in, I would say, far right ideologies in recent years, probably since the Brexit campaign initiated and some of the propaganda that was around that. You know, and in society, you know, in recent years, you know, we've gone through a lot in terms of, you know, recessions, financial difficulties as a country. And I think there are a lot of people that are angry. And I don't think the media's propaganda around racism, sometimes terrorism, or even politics helps. I think it actually creates a larger divide. But nevertheless, racism is something that we do obviously need to discuss and address. And it's obviously made people think in a variety of ways. You know, I can see a lot more businesses thinking about how they could be more diverse and inclusive. We've got Brighton and Hove Council, for example, who reviewed their stance on racism internally and externally, and upon reflection realised that they were an all-white council. And I suppose there are a lot of other institutions that are acknowledging that they're not diverse and that there's probably more that they could do to enhance equality and diversity within their working places. So in that respect, I think it's positive, but I do think that we've got a long way to go. I think it will take many years. I'm not even sure if, you know, creating an anti-racist society is even achievable. I think in many ways it's human nature to sort of differentiate sometimes, maybe, unfortunately. I think the younger generation are better in the sense that, you know, they're encouraged from a young age to be more politically correct and to view people as individuals, whereas I think many of us may be victims of, you know, our educational circumstances when growing up, you know, from gender to class and many other issues. We put people in boxes. But I do hope that the Black Lives Matter movement continues to enhance more equality within our society. And yeah, there's going to be more uncomfortable situations and conversations to be had. But change nevertheless is good. You know, nothing good comes easy, does it? So I look forward to doing whatever I can as an individual within our society to continue to push towards those changes. But yeah, with regards to Black Lives Matter as well, I think one of the issues for it is that you have the Black Lives Matter political movement, and then you have the Black Lives Matter movement promoting equality for Black lives and saying Black Lives Matter. I think there's a bit of confusion there, and I would hope that maybe in the future, as a community, maybe we could work to create a stronger campaign that doesn't allow the right-wing right-wing campaigners or individuals to target the Black Lives Matter in the way that they have. So yeah, I think there's definitely more that could be done to promote Black Lives Matter, but maybe in a way that doesn't allow far-right individuals to target it as a political issue.
Very, very good points. Yeah, I think I completely agree. You know, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but that's probably a good sign, because it's uncomfortable. It's a conversation that we need to have. So yeah, thanks for that. I wanted to end on an uplifting note. So I was going to ask can you tell me about a time in your life that you felt particularly supported or recognised? Could be in life or in your career.
Going back to my example earlier, I would say when I went for an admin job and I went into the interview. It was a fantastic interview with my potential boss. I remember leaving the interview thinking, yeah, that went really well. And then I got a call from the recruiter saying, just spoken with the employer. He didn't think you were right for the admin role. However, he saw that you're obviously very creative and tenacious, yeah. And he would like to offer you a different role and create a role for you in sales and marketing. That was a fantastic opportunity. And, you know, for somebody to work with someone who's forward thinking and really explores, you know, my qualities as an individual and gave me a chance. I was really grateful for that. And I think we need more employers like that who, you know, are very open-minded, forward-thinking, and think, how could this person, I like what this person's bringing, how can they potentially support me in my business? And a similar thing actually happened when I went for the council role with Brighton Hove City Council as a standing invitee. So at the beginning of September, off the back of their anti-racist pledge, they created a role for a standing invitee to sit on their Policy and Resources Committee, which is their highest committee. And I applied for the role, went for an interview. I was the first to be interviewed by 6 individuals, 3 of them politicians. It was very scary. And a couple of days later, I got a call and Abraham, a gentleman from the council, said, unfortunately, you haven't got the role for the Policy and Resources Committee, but just to let you know, we actually thought that you were one of the strongest people that we interviewed, and you were so good that we didn't think that it would be fair to let you go. So we would actually like to offer you a role as a standing invitee on the Tourism, Equalities, Communities and Culture Committee. So I'm now sitting on that committee. Both of those opportunities were fantastic. And they don't always happen. You know, if I'm honest, I've probably failed more times than I've achieved, like many people. And, you know, in any situation, we're judged by other people. And I was very lucky, I suppose, and I'm very grateful that on both of those particular situations, although I wasn't necessarily the right person for the roles that I was going for, the fact that I put in 120%, and, you know, beforehand, I always think about how can I support this particular initiative and how can I help? And the fact that they acknowledged that and have brought me onto their team, I'm extremely grateful for.
Oh, you clearly interview well, and we've seen that today. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on the 100 Stories initiative and sharing your points of view and your stories with us.
Thank you,
Stephanie.
Joseph. It's great to see what Sussex Innovations are doing, you know, to communicate various stories within our community and supporting various individuals. I think it's fantastic. So yeah, great initiative and happy to be involved. Thank you.
100 Stories was inspired by the hundreds of brave people of colour who have felt the Black Lives Matter movement has given them an opportunity to share their stories and experiences. This series coincides with the increasing demand and interest from allies who want to better understand the forms of prejudice and microaggressions that take place every day. We want our 100 Stories to be an accessible platform for Black people in and around our community to share their stories, either anonymously or openly. We do this in a bid to keep the conversation alive and continue to help people understand what it's like when you don't have a seat at the table. If you're interested in sharing one of your stories, please get in touch via media@sync.co.uk. Thanks for listening.